Friends, let's talk NATO. Specifically, let's talk about that time Donald Trump looked at the most successful military alliance in history and basically said, "You guys are stiffing me on the bill." Trump, never one to shy away from a Twitter tirade or a good old-fashioned complaining session, repeatedly slammed NATO members for not coughing up their fair share. He seemed particularly fixated on that magical 2% of GDP defense spending target, a target, might I add, that several members, including some major European economies, consistently missed. Now, whether you agree with Trump's tactics or not, and let's be honest, his methods were often unconventional, he did raise a valid point. The US has historically carried a heavy financial burden within NATO, but is it really a case of America being taken advantage of, or is it more nuanced than that? Buckle up, folks, because we're diving into the wild world of international diplomacy. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was established in 1949. Its primary purpose was to create a collective defense system against the threat posed by the Soviet Union. Over the years it has evolved, but the core principle remains the same. An attack against one is an attack against all. The alliance has grown to include 30 member countries, each pledging to contribute to the collective defense. However, the level of contribution has always been a contentious issue. The 2% GDP target was set as a guideline for defense spending, but not all members have met this goal. This has led to debates and disagreements within the alliance. The United States, being the largest economy and military power in NATO, has often shouldered a significant portion of the financial and military responsibilities. This has led to feelings of frustration and calls for more equitable burden sharing. So while Trump's approach may have been brash, the underlying issue of fair contribution is a legitimate concern. It's a delicate balance of maintaining unity while ensuring that all members are pulling their weight. As we delve deeper into this topic, we'll explore the complexities of NATO's funding, the political dynamics at play, and what the future might hold for this crucial alliance. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of our journey into the intricate world of NATO's finances and international diplomacy.
Let's be real. When it comes to defense spending, America goes big. The United States has always prioritized its military, ensuring that it remains a dominant force on the global stage. This isn't just about flexing muscles, it's about maintaining a strategic advantage. We're talking military budgets larger than the next several countries combined. The sheer scale of America's defense budget is staggering, dwarfing the expenditures of other nations. This financial commitment underscores the importance the U.S. places on its defense capabilities, and a big chunk of that cash goes straight into NATO's coffers. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, relies heavily on U.S. funding to maintain its operations and readiness. This alliance is crucial for collective security. We're not just talking about money, though. The U.S. is also a key military player in NATO, providing troops, equipment, and that reassuring American firepower. The presence of U.S. forces in NATO missions is a testament to America's commitment to the alliance. Basically, if NATO were a band, the U.S. would be the lead singer, the drummer, and probably the one paying for the van rental. The U.S.'s role is multifaceted, encompassing leadership support and significant financial contributions. But here's the thing. While the U.S. undoubtedly contributes a hefty sum, it's also in America's strategic interest to have a strong and unified NATO. A robust NATO means a more stable and secure world, which directly benefits the U.S. A secure Europe benefits everyone, including the good old U.S. of A. The interconnectedness of global security means that instability in one region can have ripple effects worldwide. By supporting NATO, the U.S. is investing in global stability. It's like investing in a really good neighborhood watch program. You pay your dues, but it also helps protect your own house. In the end, a safer world means a safer America, making the investment in NATO a smart and necessary move.
Imagine, if you will, a world where the US packs up its tanks, loads them onto ships, and sails away from Europe, and says sayonara to NATO, leaving behind a void that no other nation can easily fill. European leaders would be sweating more than a baguette in a sauna, scrambling to figure out how to defend their borders without the US. Without the military might and financial backing of the US, NATO would be significantly weakened. The alliance, which has long relied on American leadership and resources, would find itself in uncharted waters. It's like taking the Hulk out of the Avengers. Sure, the other members are still powerful, but things just got a whole lot more complicated. The balance of power would shift, and the remaining NATO members would have to step up in ways they never had to before. Russia, under its perpetually shirtless and brooding leader, would likely see this as an opportunity to flex its muscles in Eastern Europe. The absence of the US would embolden Russia to push its boundaries, testing the resolve of European nations. China might also be tempted to test the waters, knowing that a fractured NATO might not be as quick to respond to global crises. The ripple effects of a US withdrawal would be felt far beyond Europe, potentially destabilizing regions around the world. In short, a US withdrawal from NATO would send shockwaves through the international community, causing allies to question their security and adversaries to see new opportunities, leaving Europe vulnerable and potentially emboldening rival powers. The geopolitical landscape would be forever altered, and the world would have to adapt to a new reality where the US is no longer the cornerstone of NATO.
Now let's talk about the heart of NATO, Article 5. This bad boy is the cornerstone of the alliance, the one that says, an attack on one is an attack on all. It's the ultimate security guarantee, a promise that has kept the peace in Europe for decades. But Article 5 isn't as clear-cut as it seems. It's more like a choose-your-own-adventure book than a legally binding contract. There's no specific definition of what constitutes an armed attack, and each member gets to decide how they want to respond. Remember when the US invoked Article 5 after 9/11? Not all NATO members sent troops to Afghanistan. Some provided logistical support, others offered humanitarian aid, and a few probably just sent a strongly worded letter. The point is, Article 5 is open to interpretation.
Section 5, Article 13, the escape hatch. But wait, there's more. NATO also has Article 13, the breakup clause. It basically says that any member can peace out after 20 years. It's like the prenuptial agreement of international treaties. So far, only one country has ever used Article 13 to leave NATO, France, in 1966. And even then, they rejoined in 2009, proving that breaking up is hard to do, especially when you still share a continent with Russia. The point is, while a US withdrawal from NATO seems unlikely, it's not impossible. Article 13 gives every member an out, and if the political winds change drastically enough, we could see some countries heading for the exit.
Section 6. Flexibility in NATO. Wiggle room for members. Some experts like political scientists Dan Reiter and Brian Greenhill argue that NATO agreements are more like guidelines than actual rules. They say that the alliance has a surprising amount of flexibility, allowing members to avoid getting dragged into conflicts they'd rather sit out. This flexible interpretation of NATO rules has led to some awkward situations in the past. Remember that time everyone pretended that Turkey wasn't bombing US allies in Syria? Good times. The bottom line is that NATO's success hinges on its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. As much as some people might want clear-cut rules and ironclad guarantees, the reality is far more complex.
Section 7, the future of NATO uncertainty looms. So, what does the future hold for NATO? Honestly, it's anyone's guess. The alliance has faced challenges before and it has always managed to adapt and survive, but the United States' commitment to NATO is no longer a given. With rising tensions between the US and its European allies and the ever-present threat of Russian aggression, the future of the transatlantic alliance is uncertain. One thing is clear: NATO needs to evolve. It needs to address the concerns of its members, adapt to new threats, and find a way to share the burden more equitably. Otherwise, the alliance that has kept the peace in Europe for decades could crumble. Section 8, Global Security Implications. A world without NATO. A world without NATO would be a much more dangerous place. Without the alliance's deterrent effect, regional conflicts could easily escalate into global ones. Russia, emboldened by a weakened West, could become more assertive in its near abroad. China, sensing an opportunity, might be tempted to make a move in the Asia-Pacific region. The global security architecture that has kept the peace for decades would be in shambles, and the world would be a much more uncertain and dangerous place. Section 9, Conclusion, a transatlantic tug-of-war. The relationship between the United States and NATO is complicated, much like a long-term marriage after one partner discovers the other's secret gummy bear stash. There's love, there's resentment, there's a whole lot of history, and a shared checking account that always seems to be running low. Ultimately, the future of NATO depends on whether the US and its European allies can overcome their differences and reaffirm their commitment to the alliance. The alternative, a world without NATO, is too dangerous to contemplate. So let's hope they can work things out for all our sakes.